Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. How many are excited to be here today? Has this been a great day or what? And it's only halfway. Like, we haven't even had lunch, and look at what you've gotten so far. It's just been absolutely amazing. I mean, for me, I'm just really excited to be here, just sharing alongside Mr. Canfield, just all the writings, the teachings, everything that he's contributed to the world. Hasn't that just been spectacular? And I thought with Mr. Canfield being here today, I thought it would be fitting to share a story. How many like stories? I mean, I love stories. I love stories in many forms. I love them when they're written, of course, because you can write down notes, you can glean new understandings and new truths. I love them when they're recorded and read back to you or spoken back to you, right? Because you can be driving, you can be doing other things, and you can be listening to stuff. And I love it when directors get a hold of movies and then just bring them to life. Put them on the big screen and just bring them to life for us. As Cora said, I'm a relationship coach. I've been coaching and mentoring for over 30 years. I've run the construction company for 25 years, but I've always done the coaching and mentoring on the side. And it's a thrill to be here sharing with you today. So there's a couple other things that I want to share with you. I want to share a story, and I want to share a few steps that I've discovered along my journey that might help you grow a little bit more. Would that be helpful? Yes. And inside that, I also want to share a couple of principles that I think that are going to even help you inside those steps. So let's start with the story. The story that I'm going to share is the story of a person's account with teasing and with torment. The story that I want to share with you is this person's account with bullying and abuse. The story that I want to share with you today is my story. Now, I grew up in a wonderful home. I have beautiful parents that did everything they could to provide for my siblings and I. But it wasn't until I stepped out of home and went into school that I discovered that things were a little bit different. Jack alluded to this earlier. The first few years of our life, most of our brain, the way we think, the way we process things, it's all put in place. And as I was going to school, I discovered that things were challenged a little bit. When I was younger, I had a speech impediment. I couldn't speak. I couldn't say my S's properly, so I had to go to special class to learn how to correct that. Now, I don't know if you've ever gone to a special class, but when you go to a special class, you become that special kid. And that was me. And I was teased and I was made fun of because of the way I spoke. And then as I started learning to read and to write, I discovered there was even more challenges. As people were adding 97 and 63, I was seeing 79 and 36. And so going through math, trying to get the formula to work out just right, just wasn't working. Sometimes it would, other times the numbers were inverting on me and I couldn't get the right answer. So it was a compounded frustration as I was getting older, trying to learn how to do my math. And spelling was the same thing. When I was younger, the teacher would ask for a volunteer. And of course, I'm young. I wanted to participate. I wanted to be active in the class. And so I'd put up my hand to spell. And I'd read the word or spell the word out, only to be applauded with laughter. Because inevitably, I was spelling the word wrong. Because again, the letters were moving around on the page on me. And I was spelling it wrong. And even getting up and reading was a challenge because the words were moving around in sentences. I don't know if anybody's had that struggle, but the words just moving around in a sentence made it completely embarrassing to get up and to speak. And so what I started to do was I started to withdraw. I started stepping back a little bit in my class. Instead of being actively involved at the front, I would step into the back because going up to the blackboard, going up to the front was just confusing for me. I never knew quite what I was reading. I'd have to read things 3 and 4 times just to see if I was reading the right order, and even then sometimes it was coming out wrong. So I began to slip back. I just sat at the back of the class. I didn't put my hand up to participate, and I did the old rule. You remember the old rule in school? If your eyes are down, the teacher can't see you, right? And that's the way I lived most of the time in my classes because I was just too embarrassed to speak out. And so that's the way it became for me. I remember one time I was late going to a class, and I walked up to the doorway. I could hear the teacher teaching, and the class was all settled and ready to go. And I got up to the doorway, and I froze. Because all of a sudden I realized as soon as I walked in there, everybody was going to be looking at me. And I shrunk back. And I walked back a little bit, and I tried 3 or 4 times. I marched up to that threshold, trying to go into that class, and I just could not bring myself to face that. I had become so withdrawn and so introverted that I just couldn't face it. So I walked away from the classroom door. I walked down the hall, and I hid. I hid in a closet until that class was done. And then once the class was done, I marched out like I was always there and just carried on my day. But that's the way it became for me. By the time I got into grade 9, I had about a grade 5 reading level. By the time I got into grade 10, I had checked out. I told my parents I was quitting. I thought if I could just put that behind me, that career, that school career, if I could put that aside and move forward into something brand new, it would all be better. right? Because what is it? The grass is always greener on the other side. So I thought if I could put that behind me and move into it, but what I discovered was all those problems I had when I was younger were coming with me. I realized that there was a common denominator in all the situations I was going in. Not being able to learn, having problems with work, having problems in relationships, I was the common denominator. And I'd like to suggest that in all of our lives, in all of our relationships, regardless of what they are, whether they're in school or work or career or anything that we do, there's a common denominator. And that's you in each one of those things. And so I discovered that the only way for me to really grow and to develop was to go back to school. And so I thought, I got to face those demons again. I got to start learning and growing. I got out, I started working, only to discover that, you know what, they just didn't have any problem telling me what was what. And they had a whole colorful language to describe my condition, because I wasn't adding things up properly. I couldn't balance things out. I couldn't read and interpret drawings properly. I couldn't do all these things. It was all very slow. And so I was constantly being teased and constantly being bullied, constantly being harassed, even as I got out and started working. The upside was I was getting paid for it, at least. It wasn't like school. I was just getting abused. But out in the workforce, at least I was getting paid for it. But after I got married and had my children, I realized that I needed to grow. I needed to become more. And so I started to go back to school. I tried high school and tried to do the senior math and English. I just couldn't do that because I just didn't have those early precepts. So I gave up on that. I thought, well, go one higher. I'll go to college. So I started taking a college English course, and that was the same thing. I just didn't understand, all the precepts from earlier. I mean, I still don't know what a dangling participle is. So I just gave up on that. I stepped out of the English. But I still had this desire to learn and to grow. Why? Because I had children that I was raising and caring for, and I wanted them to have a better existence through school and adult life. Why? Because I was, at this time, coaching and mentoring youth and young adults. Again, because I wanted them to have a better experience going through high school and college and getting into relationships and starting their work careers. I wanted them to have a better experience. But I knew as a leader, I needed to grow myself. And so that caused me to go back to school. So I thought, okay, there's only one more level, so I'll go to university. I mean, what else does a guy do that drops out at grade 9? You just go to university, right? Well, that's what I did. So I signed up for a psychology course, and I took a psychology course in university. At the time, I had a mentor, a very smart, very learned man, and he came over and he sat with me for about 4 hours one afternoon. And he taught me how to read to retain knowledge. And it opened up a whole new world for me. The very first book I can ever remember reading from cover to cover was a 357-page psychology textbook. I had to read it with encyclopedias so that I could understand what they were talking about, because I didn't know any of the theories, I didn't know any of the psychologists that they were describing. So I had to study them to know what I was reading in that. But I condensed it down to 23 pages of handwritten notes, and I used that to reference it anytime I had to study or do any work from it. And again, this opened up a whole new level for me. But it began to challenge, because there were still the voices from the past. There was still that torment. There was still the ridicule. It was still the, you can't make it. Who do you think you are? So what, you got one class. You're still not going to be any better. It was listening to those voices, hearing those voices over and over again. And I remember one day just thinking, I need to put an end to these voices. I can't listen to the ridicule. I can't listen to the teasing, the torment, and all the stuff. So I went home thinking about how I could do it, how I could face my accusers. And I remember going into the washroom, and I just closed the door, and I just yelled out, enough. You see, it was me that was abusing myself all these years. It was me really causing a lot of the torment. Sure, I was teased and I was made fun of when I was younger, but I had taken all those, remember those mindsets that we form when we were young? I had taken on all that language that people had shared and made it my own. And so when people were saying, oh, you're slow, you're never going to be a good reader, I said, oh, yep, you're right, I'll never be a good reader. People said, you're not going to succeed, you're not going to get better in education. I just said, yep, you're right, I'll never do that. And I don't know if you've ever been there. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but perhaps that's something that you can identify with, because we've all had voices, we've all had things, we've all had times we've looked and we've just seen an inverted image, a broken image of ourselves. But I realized that there had to be more steps. After I confronted those voices and just said, enough is enough, then I discovered that there was 3 steps that really helped me, and I want to share those with you now. The first was I needed to discover what my values were. I've always taught that if you don't stand for one thing, you'll fall for anything. And it's so true in our lives. If we don't know what we stand for, if we don't know what we value, then anything that comes along will make sense to us. And so we have to discover and decide what our values are. If you look at somebody that has a low set of values, lying, stealing, cheating, undisciplined, not caring about anybody, what are they attracting? They're attracting those opportunities and those peoples and those circumstances in their lives. But someone that has a higher set of standards, say, of morality and of consideration, of compassion, of integrity, of honesty, then what are they doing? They're attracting those things into their lives, right? And so we have to decide what value system we want to carry on. Because as we step into that value system, as we step into that, that becomes our identity. Our identity is reflected in the things that we value. Because if you're a person of honesty, then you're putting yourself into circumstances, situations where you're honest. And people recognize you for that. They recognize that you're honest. They recognize you're a person of integrity. The same as a liar, cheater, stealer, destroyer, right? They're recognized by their actions. They're recognized by what they do. You and I, as we step into a fuller set of values and walk that out, we become identified with that. And that becomes our identity. The next thing through that is we discover our purpose. You discover your purpose by knowing what your values are. Your purpose is discovered because through your values, you set yourself up in a different arena, right? You're going to put yourself in a place. If you don't like dishonesty, you don't like lying and cheating and all that stuff, you're putting yourself in an environment where you're with honest people, and that begins to form your purpose. And inside your purpose, inside each of us, is our seeds. Just like an apple core has seeds. If you take one of those seeds out, you look at the seed, it's not just the stuff inside. Inside that seed is an actual tree. Put in the right environment, will grow and flourish and become a tree and produce great fruit. And it's the same for you and I. As we put ourselves into an environment based on our values, that those begin to flourish in our lives. So inside of us are seeds of greatness. Seeds of opportunity, seeds of dreams, seeds of vision, seeds of business. There's so many seeds inside of us, but they only come out as we step into an area where we can begin to see those flourish. Does that make sense? The next is, through that, you'll discover success. But you need to define what your success is. Because success to each one of us, if we polled this room, we'd probably have a couple hundred different ideas of what success. They'd be similar, but they'd be different. For some people, making $60,000 a year and having some RSPs and then retiring at 65 is success. And based on their values and purpose, that's a legitimate success. For others, it might be making $250,000 and not just having RSP, but other investments to grow, and then maybe not retiring at 65, but maybe 60 or 55. And that's a legitimate success according to their values and purpose. For others, it's making multiple millions of dollars and not having a job, but having a career and a business that you're growing empires, you're just growing things. And then you never retire, you just make a lifestyle of growing wealth. And that's what we're here, is to discover mastery of wealth, aren't we? That's what we're here to discover. And it's only through these three purposes these three symptoms or principles that I really feel that we can find it. But inside success, there's two other things I'd like to share with us today. Inside success, to have true success, we need to have structures and systems. Let's take a 40-story building, for example. If the 40-story building didn't have a substructure, a structure underneath it, it would just sway back and forth with any element, anything that comes along. Just the sheer weight of the building would collapse it if it didn't have proper structure. And it's the same in our lives. If we don't have structures in place in our lives, then we'll become nothing more than lottery ticket winners. You know what a lottery ticket winner is? They did a study where they followed them for about a year. Some people that had won mass amounts in lotteries, and they discovered that after 12 months that they were either broke or in debt. Why? Because they didn't have any systems or structures in order to handle that money. They had no idea what to do with it, so they were just blowing it. It was just rushing out. And it's the same in our lives. If we don't have structures and systems in place, everything we earn is just going to roll its way out unless we've got a way to control it and file it and make it work. With structures as well, or inside as well, we need to have systems, because systems will take us from one level to the next, right? If we didn't have systems in place in, say, this 40-story building, where would we all be? We'd all be meeting in the lobby, right? If we didn't have any systems to take us one floor to the next or one level to the next, we would just be meeting in the lobby. Nobody would experience what life was like on the 40th floor. And it's the same in our lives. If we don't have systems in place to grow to that next level, to discover those next steps, then we just live at one plane. We live at one level and think that's it. And maybe sometimes you've heard yourself say that this is all there is to life for me. I'm just going to eat, work, sleep, and die. Right? And some of us, we just get into that mindset, get into that mentality. But if we get a coach into our life, if we bring mentors into our lives, then they're going to help raise our game. They're going to help bring us to the next level. They'll show us the steps. Being around people that are in this room can help you grow to the next level. They can help you discover the other things, other things that you need to do to begin to really have wealth and master it. I clicked to this slide prematurely, but that's the image that we need to get. We need to have a good self-image of who we are. It's not how people see us, but we need to have a good, strong image of how we see ourselves. I went from being a boy that sat in the back of classrooms, sat in the back of auditoriums, never participated, to today being a man that stands on stages and speaks around the world. I went from being a boy, thank you. I went from being a boy that stayed out in the halls and hid in closets because he was late coming into classes. Today, I can walk into a room and I know there's not a person that I can't mentor or coach. I went from being a boy that struggled putting sentences together, struggled making reports and doing those things to this September. By this September, I'll have published my 5th book. Thank you. But that's the exciting thing about having a coach, is a coach can help get to that place. I've had many coaches and mentors and still have coaches and mentors in my life to help me grow to that next level, to help me discover what those next steps are. I work with people to help them rescue relationships and to help them discover that. I help them to see what the next level is and help them master the next steps in their lives and help them to grow themselves to the next level. Today, I knew that my time was going to be pressed and I wouldn't be able to share all the things that I wanted to share with you. I had 3 other principles that I'd love to share with you under the success principles. I had 3 other ones that I'd love to share. And so what I decided to do is just create an evening where we could jump on a Zoom call. And Zoom is it's just like being here. We can see each other and it's very interactive. And I've decided to create a Zoom call where we could learn those other 5 principles, or the other 3 principles. Would those be of value to you if we could get on a Zoom call and learn those other 3? I would love to share those with you. It's a free Zoom call. I just want to invite you to join me because I want to do this justice. I want to do this, I want to create value for you because it's important that we learn and discover what those next steps are and learn how to get systems and structures in our lives so that we can begin to move forward. So if you want to join my team and I at our table at the back here during the break's going to be coming up after the next speaker. I'd love to get your contact information so we can get you hooked up on this Zoom call. And we're going to set a couple of nights so that we'll make sure that we can get everybody accommodated. I'm quite accommodating. So we'll set up a couple of evenings where we can make it happen and get you on there so that I can get those other principles into your hand. As well, I have this little book here, which I've been absolutely thrilled with. It went number 1. It was a number 1 best-selling in Canada, Your Relationship Rescue Handbook. And I brought a bunch of copies, but I put 20 aside specifically for the first 20 people that come back and sign up. I'd love to autograph a copy and get it into your hands and begin to maybe perhaps start that journey walking with you to help you grow yourself to the next level and to discover those next steps. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Congrats. Good seeing you.